voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Joe Biden was in Pennsylvania, found his way to Allentown, to the Mack truck plant there in Macungie. Sixth president in a row to visit the Mack truck plant there in Macungie. 6 in a row. This is a significant manufacturing facility. One of the main key truck manufacturers in the country right here at home. And it's one of those things that everyone loves to go to and say, oh, look, American workers, union work and all of that stuff. Joe Biden's the first guy who said, look, I reject out of hand this defeatist view that the forces of automation and globalization mean we can't have good paying union jobs in America. And that plant shows it. Look, they make a great product. People love the iconic Mack truck. We can do these things with American labor if this is one of those ifs, if the policies are put into place to make sure that we do, and we expect it. We, the people, demand it. And I've been saying for a long time, I always look, I look for Buy American, first I look for Buy American made by union workers, then I look for Buy American, then I look for, stuff made by union workers. That's how my pecking order goes when I make a purchase. And you ask the kids, we'll go and we'll look at something and go, okay, we want to see where things are made. We need to be more activist consumers. We need to demand that the things that we consume made right here at home by our neighbors, well, by ourselves probably. So glad to see Joe Biden in town. Glad to see him talking about Buy American, laid out the way forward. Going to use government procurement to buy things that we make here. And you go, that shouldn't even be a story. That should have been a given. That should have been going on all along. But sadly, we've allowed corporate America to abandon our shores while we give them whatever they want, all the tax breaks and all the handouts and subsidies and all that stuff. And now you've got a president. And look, Joe Biden wasn't my first guy, but I'm thrilled by the fact that he's singing the right songs. Man, he's hitting the right notes. The chord progression is spot on. Now, what do we do with it? Can we get Congress to get their heads out of their behinds long enough? Can we get them to stop fighting long enough? Can we get them to stop disagreeing long enough? I don't know. I am hopeful. That's why today I was pleasantly surprised that the Senate, first it was the Senate we've brokered a deal. There is a deal. $1.2 trillion over 8 years, $550 billion in new spending. We're gonna work on our infrastructure. And then a little bit later, the cloture vote came, advanced the bill 6732. Looks like we're gonna get it done. Looks like it might. Again, this is a might. I am not sold on the idea that we're getting any infrastructure bill, because leave it to Democrats to figure out how to screw that up, and giving Republicans the ability to help come along. But the $1.2 trillion hard infrastructure plan, that's going to have $110 billion in new funding for roads and bridges and major projects like that. $40 billion of which bridge repair, because we desperately need it. Replace some bridges, rehabilitation, that stuff. Also $73 billion to upgrade our electrical grid. Haven't needed that for several decades, but gonna move in that direction. $65 billion to get us the broadband that we need, because rural communities have been getting really the short end of the stick for way too long. $55 billion for clean drinking water, because you kind of need that. Maybe we clean up some of those lead pipes. Also $50 billion for flooding and coastal resilience. Personally, I say just move back a little bit. If you bought the house on the water, that's on you. You get one bailout. If you rebuilt and put it right back there without mitigating or without doing stuff, that's on you going forward. Just my thoughts. But Chuck Schumer did come out and say that he was going to keep them through the weekend because no recess without it. Looks like it might happen. Now everyone was happy. Things were good. I was questioning why today was the day that it came out after the hearings yesterday, so this could steal the headlines. And I was going, this is a little curious. We need to get it done, but a little curious. And the news was, hey, good. It was something bipartisan. We're going to get this done. And then Kristen Sinema. What can you say about Senator Dipsy Doo from Arizona? I remember her with her little funny skirt on, doing that little dance where she did the thumbs down for the minimum wage increase. And she didn't need to do it. It wasn't going to pass anyway. She had to put that little body English on it, do a little dance, a little curtsy kind of thing. She came out today and said that, well, the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation infrastructure bill, just too high for her. And this sent, everything into chaos because guess what could possibly happen? And this was doomsday scenario I talked about months ago, that we could end up with nothing. Because Senator Dipsy Doo here is saying, nope, we're not moving on. That's too much. We're not doing it. Maybe they can whittle that down a little bit. But now you've got House Democrats who are going to have to go, wait a second. We were told we were going to get that bipartisan bill of just the hard infrastructure stuff, and then we were simultaneously going to move the legislation to help us get the human infrastructure that we need. Help for senior citizens, help for to educate children. The human infrastructure that's been lacking for so long. It's going to be interesting to see how the House Democrats play this. Because remember, they were told both bills were gonna pass together. They were gonna get what they could get in a bipartisan fashion, and then they were going to go ahead and move on the things that our society needs desperately. And they were gonna go that alone. Starting to address climate change. Starting to do something about making a two-year college degree more accessible. A bunch of stuff that's in that to help move us forward and to help us do a little bit better. Now you've got the good senator from Arizona saying, well, no, we're not going to do that. And again, this is what I always expect from Democrats. It's that circular firing squad that they're so famous for. This is one of those things that by having such a big tent, you end up with characters like Semina. You end up like characters like Manchin. And look, I think Manchin would come along on a big spending bill because his state desperately needs it. Now, what's weird is Manchin can basically do whatever he wants because he's in a solidly red state, and no one's really going to push him too hard. Sinema is in a swing state. And, what does that say for her reelection in the event that we actually get nothing? Because I've taken the position, if we get nothing, if this doesn't get through, Joe Biden's going to have a rough 2 years. Because the Democrats are going to lose both the House and the Senate. And you will see an impeachment of Joe Biden immediately for no reason. There will be no reason. They'll pull out the 25th Amendment. They'll pull out whatever they need to do to get him ousted. And then they'll go after Kamala Harris as well. This sadly, and I go back to the hearings yesterday. We're in this weird kind of world. We're in this weird kind of world where the Republicans want power more than they want democracy. They want to be able to control everything. The vote of the people, the will of the people be damned. Because you think about the things over the years that have died at the hands of Republicans. Labor law reform, education reform, single-payer health care. Go down the list. They haven't come up with an actual plan on how to make lives better. They simply spend their time in figuring out how to divide and pit us against each other, keep us at each other's throat. I truly believe, and this is one of those things where if 5 years ago I would have never said what I'm going to say now. 5 years ago I would have never believed it possible. 5 years ago I would have said that's insane, could never happen here. We're better than that. But I do believe the current Republican leadership, if they gain control of the House and Senate, will impeach Biden immediately. For nothing. And Harris will go as well. So that whoever the Speaker of the House is, and who knows, maybe they do try and make Donald Trump Speaker of the House. That's been thrown around a number of times already. That's on the Republican agenda. I mean, stop and think about that for a second. They would bring him back as Speaker of the House, impeach both Biden and Harris, and reinstall him. Now, it would be later than here in the next couple of weeks, because we were told in the next couple of weeks, I'm still waiting to see if he's reinstalled. But it could be just another year and a half down the road. And this is where the incredible part for me is. I don't think the Republican Party would care. They would justify it. As well, they stole the last election. Because this is why all this stop the steal stuff is still going on. I don't know that they really believed that they were going to be able to overthrow our government. I don't know that they really believe that at the higher levels. At the minion levels, all of the folks who showed up really seriously ready to hang representatives, even hang the vice president. I truly believe they thought this is our time. This is our time to take over. This is our time to instill our guy. But the upper folks, I don't know. I don't think they thought it was possible. And look, if it's not for our military leaders, which again I can't believe we're saying, we could quite possibly be in a moment with a fascist dictator. I mean, think about that for a second. And like I said, look, 5 years ago when he took office, I said it was going to be bad. It was going to be horrible. But we would work through it. We would get through the horrible time. Because we believe in democracy, we believe in our institutions, we believe in our Constitution, we believe in the rule of law, we believe in the sanctity of the ballot box, we believe in these things. Only to now find out that, well, only one party really does. And the other is ready and able to burn all of that down for pure political power. That, to me, is just remarkable. And beyond where my mind was able to take me on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2017. Now, I've had some people go, no, Rick, I was there. I was expecting all of this. I wasn't there. I knew it was going to be bad. Knew the criming would happen, and the criming would happen often. I knew that would be the most corrupt administration in our history. I knew there were going to be tons of hearings and court battles and perp walks. Didn't realize it was going to be this kind of bad. Now, maybe I should have seen it. Maybe I should have been able to read the pulse of the anger of the people who support him. Because I've been saying that, look, the working class of this country is extremely angry. Because they haven't been able to live the lives that they were promised. That economic ability that their parents had. Because we always believe we're going to do better. We got better up. The future's bright. And for a lot of people, they're struggling to keep the lights on, struggling to keep a roof over their heads, struggling to keep the kids fed, worried about college costs that are going through the roof. And instead of using the ability of government to address those issues, they've been sold spoon-fed on the idea that, no, we need the very wealthy to bail us out through handouts to them that will eventually trickle down to us in some weird way. And then everything once it's privatized will be better. And we find out that was completely backwards. The more we privatize, the worse our lives get. The more we hand over to corporate America, the higher things cost. The more that we give to the 1%, the harder it is for us to attain. It wasn't surprising when they laid it out, but it's what it's turned into. And the question is, how much are we going to allow? And this is a soul-searching moment for my Republican friends, because I've had a couple of conversations with people who truly don't believe January 6th was that big of a deal. They truly believe it was just, people, walking into their house, and that they really weren't going to hurt anyone. They really weren't going to hang anyone. They just built the gallows as a prop. That they're good people. Good God-fearing Christian people who were, if you listen to the testimony yesterday, beating and tasing and calling racial names and threatening to kill people that they claim that they loved, people that they claim they idolize, that they back. With that kind of idolization, I don't want people idolizing me. And we have to get to the bottom of this. We have to hold those accountable who did the horrible things on January 6th. And they have to go to jail. From the top all the way down. But especially the top. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Allison Gill is going to be here to share some thoughts on the hearing yesterday and maybe what we get to out of this January 6th Select Committee. Quick break. Right back with Dr. Gill.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day more than 10,000 African Americans marched down New York's Fifth Avenue in what is known as the Silent Parade. The protest came in the aftermath of the July 2nd East St. Louis race riot and a number of lynchings in Texas. Organized by black scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, and the NAACP, the Silent Parade protested lynchings and anti-black violence. Children led the march dressed in white. Women, who were also dressed in white, followed them. Men dressed in dark suits marched behind. It was considered the first public protest of racial violence in the United States. Alexis Newman describes the scene as the parade proceeds to Madison Square. The marchers carried banners and posters stating their reasons for the march. Both participants and onlookers remarked that this protest was unlike any other seen in the city and the nation. There were no chants, no songs, just silence. Some signs read, "Mother, do lynchers go to heaven?" and "Mr. President, why not make America safe for democracy?" Protesters hoped President Woodrow Wilson would make good on his election promises to promote rights for blacks. But Wilson took no action. In fact, he opposed anti-lynching legislation and continued segregationist policies in federal offices. In an editorial for the New York Age, James Weldon Johnson pointed out, quote, that their brothers and sisters, people just like them, were Jim Crowed and segregated and disenfranchised and oppressed and lynched and burned alive in this, the greatest republic in the world, the great leader in the fight for democracy and humanity. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Liz Cheney had an interesting statement yesterday, and again, I can't believe a Cheney. I can't believe that I'm holding out hope that a Cheney is going to save the country after spending 8 years of misery with her father, Darth Cheney, who surprisingly still's alive. I mean, that's the weird thing. And look, at the end of it, as I've said before, the only thing I've heard of a Cheney is just shoot somebody in the face already. That's kind of what I was hoping the story is. Maybe she'd have shot Jim Jordan in the face. But Liz Cheney came out and said we can't leave the violence of January 6th and its causes uninvestigated. I agree. She says we must know what happened every minute of that day in the White House, every phone call, every conversation, every meeting leading up to, during, and after the attack. She added that if those responsible are not held accountable, and if Congress does not act responsibly, we will face the threat of more violence in the months to come and another January 6th every 4 years. And I agree with her. This is the weird part of this. Because look, I've been saying that these people are riled up, ready for the next civil war. This is just giving them license. And here to share some thoughts on the hearing, Liz Cheney's statement, and maybe where we end up here. On down the road, I've asked our good friend Dr. Allison Gill to come talk with us. Allison is the host of the Mueller She Wrote podcast and also Daily Beans pod as well. Allison, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rick. I'm glad to be here.
So Cheney comes out and says, "Look, we got to get to the bottom of this. This is not going to stop until we do. Could happen every 4 years." I actually agree with her.
Yeah, it's a rare day that I agree with a Cheney, with anybody with the last name Cheney, as you were saying in the opening remarks there of this segment. Politics makes strange bedfellows, they say, and this is one of the strangest ones, I have to admit.
Yeah, we had Joe Walsh, the former congressman from Illinois, on the program the other day, and he came out and said that that Kevin McCarthy's a moron, and Nancy Pelosi said the same thing. I go, look at this, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Walsh agree on something. Kevin McCarthy's a moron. So you're right, strange bedfellows. But this is the weird thing. I mean, I'm watching Republican voters. I'm watching Republicans that I'm talking to who still they've bought the January 6th wasn't a big deal, and that everything that we're seeing was it's just a witch hunt.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're being very careful about who they're going to be subpoenaing. We know that the chair of the 1-6 committee, Benny Thompson, has said that he and the committee are going to be in close contact with Attorney General Merrick Garland over what materials they can get from the Department of Justice and the White House. And as you know, Department of Justice came out yesterday and said, we aren't going to assert executive privilege for former DOJ Trump officials. They can testify freely, right, if they need to. And I think that was a very important, seemingly obvious thing that should be normal, but hasn't been normal for us for the past 4 years. And I think that they have to kind of do this in a manner not only that is following the facts, so that it doesn't seem like they're doing this politically, making these subpoenas a political thing, excuse me, but that they also have to be in conjunction and work closely with the Department of Justice so they don't step on their toes.
Right, but here's my problem. I know they've got subpoena power and all of that stuff, and they can do what they've got to do. My problem is I know when they've given subpoenas in the past that these folks never testify.
Yeah, no, and we'll see it go to court. But fortunately, we now have a Department of Justice who's not going to assert executive privilege and who is not going to fight on behalf of the former administration to prevent people from testifying. I don't think we'll see what a lot of people want to see, which is people who would be arrested and or fined, with that inherent contempt thing that Congress is supposed to be able to do but hasn't done in 100 years. Right. I hope nobody's really kind of expecting that to happen, because I don't see it happening.
I got a bunch of people who expect that. I go, for you and me, yeah, if they subpoena you or me, we better get our behind there. But we're not in that elite class that can fight this for 4, 5, 6 years down the road.
No, correct. We aren't. And we have to remember recently it took 2 years to eventually get the testimony of Don McGahn. But again, we won't have the Department of Justice a Bill Barr sticking their nose in and saying executive privilege, executive privilege.
Right. Now, the thing that gets me is, you brought up, we talked about Cheney a moment ago, and, Darth Cheney, I was expecting once Barack Obama took office, there to be an investigation into at least the aluminum tubes and all the lies that got us into Iraq. That didn't happen. It didn't happen, during the Reagan years with Iran-Contra. Didn't happen during the Nixon years. We've never held anyone accountable. Why is this moment different? Because I've taken the position we just haven't done it. Why is now different?
Well, why is now more important, or why do you think we will this time?
Why do you think we will this time? I know why. I want to hold everybody accountable so that the next time we don't have to keep doing this, because every time it seems to get worse and worse and worse. And this was pretty bad.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen some really big fat signals that at least the insiders of 1-6 are going to be held accountable. First of all, we had reporting back in February that they were investigating Roger Stone. That was from the New York Times, and his role in instigating or conspiring to instigate the attack on the Capitol. We've seen reportings from 302s where investigators have been asking if these boots on the ground terrorists, which is what they are, had any contacts or discussions with members of Congress. So that means they're investigating members of Congress. And then recently in this DOJ filing that, where they say we're not going to represent Mo Brooks in the Swalwell lawsuit, they said, we are currently investigating this. We're currently looking into this. And so right now, we're going to say that we're not going to, we're not going to replace the Mo Brooks with the United States in this lawsuit. We're not going to give him immunity here because his speech at the Ellipse was a campaign speech, which is not covered in his scope of his duties. But further, if the court doesn't like that reason, he instigated an attack on the Capitol, and that's what's being alleged in this complaint by Swalwell. And until the court concludes that he didn't do that, he shouldn't be certified by the United States. He shouldn't be represented by the Department of Justice, because instigating a coup is the opposite of your duty as a member of Congress. It's so far outside of the scope. And they said, we're looking into this, and no federal employee should be covered by us. So they kind of hinted a little bit that we're not going to cover Trump. We're not going to cover Trump Jr. We're not going to cover anybody who worked for the government, who had incendiary things to say that could have instigated the attack on the Capitol, until you prove, the courts, until you can conclude that what is alleged in these complaints did not happen. So I do have faith that they're looking at the generals here, which is what happened when, they were giving closing statements during the hearing yesterday. And all the officers were like, please, we can't investigate the people who incited this. We need you to do it. But we also have to be careful to do it in a way that doesn't step on the criminal investigation toes of the Department of Justice, like with what happened with Oliver North, et cetera, when we kind of dug our own grave on the criminal prosecution by having people come out into a congressional inquiry, which, doesn't really have any consequences.
So which because I've said that this committee, I don't know is going to get anywhere. I don't know we're going to get anything out of this. For me, it's the Department of Justice pursuing these criminal charges. That's how I think we end up going there. This is how you maybe get Trump to have to testify. I had someone the other day tell me Trump's going to have to testify in front of this committee, and I said I rarely say never, but there's no way Trump is never going to testify in front of this committee. Never.
No, I concur. But in a criminal investigation, he would be compelled by the court to be deposed, right? So we need to let that happen. And it's more important, I'm with you, that the Department of Justice does the criminal investigation here than a congressional investigation. And I had said from the beginning, just don't do this in Congress. Set up a special counsel, set up an independent counsel to look at this. But this is what the Department of Justice is doing. The Department of Justice is doing what an independent counsel would do.
Yeah, but my problem is I'll be honest, I was not a Merrick Garland fan when Barack Obama pulled him out as his Supreme Court justice pick. Very moderate guy, center of the road, institutionalist, if you will. Was not thrilled when Joe Biden pulled him out. I know a lot of my lefty friends we're going to show them. Not so much. Are my concerns that he's an institutionalist, much like Mueller was, and I don't think you're going to get much movement out of them. Are my concerns valid, or do you think I'm being overly cautious?
I think your concerns are valid given what we've had to go through. Everybody's kind of feeling that way. And, I have three glaring red lines for Merrick Garland where I will snatch my support or even tepid support in an instant. And the first one was if they decided to represent Mo Brooks. They didn't do that, so they didn't cross that red line. The second one is if the Department of Justice announces that they will not pursue charges of obstruction of justice against the former president. They have it all laid out for him in Volume 2 of the Mueller report. Conservative Mueller wants these charges to be pursued, and he set this up and teed it up for that very exact specific purpose. If Merrick Garland doesn't go after that, that's a dereliction of duty, in my opinion. You could even say, a lot of folks say, well, they might get him in New York. He go to jail in New York, so we don't have to do that. You have to do that. It was the same with the impeachment. The Senate will never convict. That doesn't mean you don't do your duty.
Right.
You would be derelict in your duty if you didn't go after those charges. And the third line would be if they represented Trump in the Swalwell lawsuit, which they pretty much made very clear would not happen when they gave the Mo Brooks explanation for why they wouldn't certify him. So two out of three so far. That last red line still remains for me personally. He towed that line with the E. Jean Carroll case and the Lafayette Square case. But those were decisions made by the last Justice Department, and he seems hell-bent on upholding decisions they made to not make it look political and overturn what they decided. But his arguments were terrible on both of those cases. And of course, when he held back the second half of that Bill Barr memo, asked for a stay so that he didn't have to release that under deliberative process privilege because he didn't want to overturn the prior Justice Department. But these Mo Brooks decisions, these new decisions, are his alone to make, and he's making the right call on them. It's just the old ones that I'm worried about.
Yeah. And again, we had my friend Will Bunch, a national columnist with the Philly Inquirer, on Monday, and he wrote in his piece, which was brilliant. The Democrats counter a GOP willing to smash the guardrails of democracy with cautious drivers who won't veer near the double yellow lines. That's how I view Merrick Garland, right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we'll see. Like there were a lot of hints dropped this week with the Mo Brooks decision and the decision to not assert executive privilege against former Trump officials. That to me says we're here to cooperate. And something else that this 1-6 commission I think would be really good at getting is all the documents, the phone logs, the things that can prove. Jim Jordan just admitted on television he talked to Trump. We can see those phone logs. We'll be able to get that and understand it. More so than I think any testimony that we ever wish we could get, like from Rudy Giuliani or Mo Brooks or Jim Jordan or Trump Jr. or Trump himself. I'm with you on that. I think they can subpoena all they want. I don't think that it's going to be an easy road to get those folks in. And even if you do get those folks in, you can't really ask questions that can interfere with the criminal investigation into the incitation of the insurrection. So there might be a lot of behind closed doors depositions with meetings with the Department of Justice as to what can be released to the public. But their job is to figure out what happened. And Merrick Garland's job is to prosecute people for breaking the law. And I hope he does. And I think he is, and I'm reserving judgment until we find out whether he is or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I want the criminal stuff. Even if New York does try and convict Trump, I still think you have to go after this simply for the messaging of the future, so that this kind of behavior stops. Because look, every Republican president in my lifetime has had significant crimes leaving office that we just said, let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, no, but I talked to Andy McCabe at length about this, and he told me, and he said in his book, The Threat, he said, look, when we opened the Trump-Russia investigation, we had a predication that crime could have been committed. And if we didn't open that investigation, given Manafort, given Flynn, given Gates, we would have been derelict in our duty. And we can't be derelict in our duty. And I have to imagine that the DOJ Garland envisions also has that philosophy. We have to and we must, and not just because it's our duty, but like you said, we can't let this go, because we will be sending the message that a president can obstruct justice, can incite an insurrection, can conspire on a domestic terror attack on the Capitol without facing consequences. And he's been very, very clear about about that being a problem and nobody being above the law. But we'll see if he holds that line.
Yeah, the Nixon line. If the president doesn't, it's not illegal. We've kind of, at this point, we're kind of at that moment. But I like what Jamie Raskin said during an interview. He said they want to find out who organized it, mobilized it, who financed it, how they did it, why they did it, and are we still under a threat today? I want to find out who funded this stuff. Do we get to know that? I mean, by subpoenaing all these records, do we find these billionaires? Do we find the Mike Lindells and the Publix woman and all these groups that funded this stuff?
Well, I think that the Department of Justice is more equipped to do that kind of follow the money investigation with the amount of prosecutors and FBI agents, et cetera, that they have. But I mean, there are a lot of talented people on this commission, and they have a huge gang of lawyers, I'm sure, who can help look into this. But, a lot of these folks aren't prosecutors. They aren't law enforcement, and they might have a little bit of a harder time following the money. But I hope either way we find out, whether it's through a criminal speaking indictment from the Department of Justice or whether it's through a report from the 1-6 Commission.
Yeah, last question I've got for you. In looking at this, I know a lot of people are excited there. Oh, we're going to go get them. Is this a go get them thing, or is this just we're going to get a report at the end with the who, what, and why and all that, and it's not going to lead to any perp walking or any of that stuff?
No, it wouldn't lead to any perp walking. Of course, they can make criminal referrals to the Department of Justice, but it has to be assumed that the Department of Justice knows more than this committee will ever know or could ever know. So it would be sort of like telling them stuff they already, like, yes, thank you. We know, and we're already 6 steps ahead of you on that. So no, I don't think you'll see any perp walks. This is to find out what happened, like you said, who funded it. And those are important things to know to prevent the next one from happening. But the best thing we can do to prevent the next one from happening is put people in jail.
I am right there with you, and starting with the former guy. To me, it's that simple. But Allison, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Hope folks will check out your podcast, Mueller, She Wrote, and the Daily Beans. In fact, you got a whole slew of podcasts, don't you?
Yeah, we just started a network called MSW Media. With a bunch of great shows on there, including Greg Olear and Glenn Kirshner, Renato Mariotti. And then, of course, I love your show, and thank you so much for everything that you do, because I think that the information that you bring to the people is crucial and critical. And the best thing that we can do to hold this Department of Justice's feet to the fire is to talk, and to talk loudly at them.
Good stuff. Allison, I appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Dr. Allison Gill. Make sure you check out her work. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day that flames burnt in the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. Armed Forces set fire to a shanty town of unemployed World War I veterans. The veterans had come to the Capitol to demand the bonus that they had been promised for their service. The payment was not due until 1945. But the nation was in the throes of the Great Depression. Desperate veterans demanded the bonus be paid early. Walter W. Walters, a veteran and unemployed former cannery worker, called for his fellow veterans to go to Washington, D.C. and demand payment. From across the country, veterans answered the call. Many hopped trains to make their way to the nation's capital. They called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force. This echoed the American Expeditionary Force, the name for U.S. troops that had fought in France during World War I. In May, the veterans began to arrive in Washington, D.C. They set up tents and shelters in vacant lots and open spaces. The largest encampment was along the Anacostia River. Some in Washington began to warn that the 8,000 protesters of the Bonus Army were led by communists. But retired Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler came to the camp to encourage the protesters. He said,
I never saw such fine Americanism as is exhibited by you people. You have just as much right to have a lobby here as any steel corporation. Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No.
But Army Chief of Staff General MacArthur was less sympathetic. He ordered troops to clear out the veterans. With cavalry, tanks, rifles, and tear gas, they ousted the protesters and burnt the Anacostia River encampment to the ground.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you gotta love the fact that the governor of Iowa, this Kim Reynolds, because we're seeing a spike in the COVID variant in a number of states. You've got Texas, you've got Florida, you've got Missouri, Iowa, coming up there as well. So you got to find a boogie person. You got to find the boogeyman, the whodunit. And the whodunit is all of these illegals who are coming in, these migrants who are unvaccinated coming from Mexico. And I'm going, hold on. I think we can look a lot closer to home to half of the dimwits who are proudly saying they're never getting vaccinated right here at home. I think we can blame them first and then go after the boogeyman. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on our good senator from Arizona, Dipsy Doo, and the fact that we might not get an infrastructure bill at all, which is scary to me and angering. I've asked our good friend Peter Morley to come talk with us. Peter is a patient advocate, survivor, and one of my favorite people on the Twitters and a good friend. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, Rick, always for you. It's been way too long. It's wonderful to be reunited with you, and happy to lend my voice to you anytime.
We need to get this human infrastructure in place. And the story today is, the Republicans, there's a bipartisan deal. We might get some roads and bridges, maybe. But the other part of it was we're going to move this other bill through budget reconciliation. And it seemed like things were going in the right direction. Maybe we were going to get them both. Now you got Kristen Simina coming out saying, no, I'm not in favor of the bigger bill. And my first thought was, are we going to get a little dance out of her like she did with the minimum wage that she shot down? Because this is horrible. This could be horribly painful for a whole bunch of people who desperately need help.
Well, I just have to, I can't comment on her thoughts, but I just want to say it is not that you're aware of this, because it feels like I've been doing this for like 20 years, but for the last 4 years, almost exactly actually it was 4 years, that I've been traveling to DC. And how did I get to DC? I got to DC on an Amtrak train. And you know what Amtrak is? Infrastructure. I got on a Amtrak train that got me to DC to talk to the senators, to be in that 5:15 meeting in John McCain's office when he did the thumbs down. That was infrastructure. Healthcare is infrastructure. We were talking about hospitals, we're talking about PPE, we're talking about supply chains, we're talking about NIH research, we're talking about what I've spoken to members about. I've had a lot of meetings with members recently because I'm doing this tour of the Northeast, and hopefully the Delta variant won't curtail that. But we're talking about specifically when you talk about healthcare. The thing that's gotten me through these last months has been having telehealth. And you know what? Telehealth is infrastructure because it is broadband. And I mean, I would have put my health at great risk if I had to go and see my doctors in person during the height of the pandemic. And the pandemic may reach new heights. I mean, who knows? But the important thing to remember is everything that is infrastructure is healthcare, and everything that is healthcare affects your health, whether you know it or acknowledge it or not.
Yeah, this is the thing that gets me is, everything you laid out there, I'm missing where the hippie liberal stuff is and where all the unnecessary spending was, because all we're hearing from the right is, that's all, wish list socialism. And now you've got, Cinema who's coming out going, well, that's too much. Look, we've had decades of no investment. We're way behind. We need something big. We need something bold. We need something visionary. Sadly, she doesn't seem to be it.
Well, I just don't, what about the people in rural America? What about the people, like, how do we reach them? I'm a healthcare advocate. I'm a patient too with chronic illness, but how do we reach those people in rural America? Like, how are we supposed to get to them without infrastructure? I mean, that is the crux of our economy. And if it's crumbling, how are we going to fix it? How are we going to help millions of Americans? So I can't believe that this is depending on her. That's what it's like. It's always depending on someone. I mean, the names change, but it's just like it's always comes down to one person.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. And look, as you said, it's healthcare. It's transportation. It's also education. It's also taking care of our seniors. It's also helping the disabled community. It's doing it's looking at how to save our planet by moving us in a direction to address climate change. There's so much that has to be done, and to say no, we have to do this on the cheap, to me is just kind of insane.
No, I agree. I mean, that's why I'm doing this whole effort called Healthcare Awareness Month. Every month should be Healthcare Awareness Month, and I realize it's a huge, general, large umbrella. But when you talk about Healthcare Awareness Month, we're going to make it for August, and actually, there's talk about making it a resolution on the House floor. Maybe that'll get through instead of infrastructure. I mean, who knows with the way Congress works, but the whole point behind the Healthcare Awareness Month is to take the legislation that is going on right now in Congress and to amplify it, because there are good things coming out of Congress. I mean, there's talk about expanding Medicare and including vision and dental and things for medical durable equipment, lowering drug prices, expanding Medicaid. These are things that should have been done years ago, and they finally have maybe they will get done in this bill, but infrastructure is the core for everything. So for it not to even not, the thought of it not getting done is unfathomable. And as somebody who relies on infrastructure, we all rely on infrastructure every single day of our lives, whether we know it or not. It's just, I just have no words.
Now, she did say that she's going to negotiate. She's going to work really hard. She didn't want to deflate, too many hopes, but she's going to work real hard.
Well, I'm glad she is, and I'm working really hard too to try to amplify these efforts, because I think our members of Congress still need our help. And unfortunately, what I've found in the 117th Congress is I found a lot of people are putting themselves in the back burner, and we can't do that. We got to hold their feet to the fire. We have to hold whatever party it is, we have to hold them accountable. We have to say, hey, you gotta do what's right for every American, because this is, like you said, I mean, our roads, our bridges, our hospitals, I mean, they're crumbling. Some of our hospitals are closing. I mean, how are we supposed to help people? How are we supposed to help people of all socioeconomic backgrounds? I mean, how are we supposed to do this?
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Peter. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But here's the weird thing, and this is where, it's interesting to me that, Joe Biden has, spent a lot of time, pushing the idea that we're going to expand, as you said, the things for Medicare, vision, dental, all of that, also expanding Medicaid. All of these things are going to overwhelmingly help red states, the people who voted against him. And, I know it's a huge departure from the former guy, but, I don't even believe that Biden's doing it because he thinks he's going to get them to vote for him. I think he's doing it because, look, it's the right thing for the country. It's the thing that's going to help us move forward as a nation.
The thing that keeps me up at night, Rick, are all of the people that could have been helped during COVID, all the people that died by the non-expansion of Medicaid states, those red states that you had mentioned that should have been expanded, and their governors and their state houses decided we're not going to expand Medicaid, even though they had the money there to expand it. They decided they're not going to do it. And these people during this pandemic died. Yeah. And even before the pandemic died because they fell into what they call the Medicaid gap. And they didn't exactly have enough tax credits for, I mean, they just fell into not even qualifying for Medicaid and having too much income for the ACA marketplace. So that's what happens when you don't have an expanded Medicaid state. And
even if the voters want it, I look at Missouri, where the voters said they wanted it. The governor's like, no, not doing it.
And I don't even know what to say there. I mean, it's just like, we got to keep the pressure on. We got to keep that grassroots efforts alive. I mean, I realize that the person who shall be named, who shall not be named, we still need, I mean, the great thing about those years is that there was so much unity. There was so much fight. There was so much, I mean, we really got to get back to that. I mean, I haven't stopped. I know you haven't stopped, but a lot of people have stopped because there's something called complacency that unfortunately they stop for that. And we can't stop. There are so many people that need help. There are millions of Americans that need help. And now with these COVID long haulers, I mean, you know, and God knows there'll be additional ones every single day. I think the latest report I read is that at least 10% of people who've had COVID will be a COVID long hauler. And then I hear stories of people applying for programs like Social Security disability that are being turned down. And you know how that works was when you apply for Social Security disability, 60% of those people get turned down the first time. And by the time they get approved, they're dead. And what are you supposed to do? So there's just so many things. I know we're talking about infrastructure, but that is part of our infrastructure. Healthcare is infrastructure. I can't say it enough. And That's what we're doing in Healthcare Awareness Month.
No, and that's the important thing, because look, when we think of infrastructure, we're thinking roads and bridges, and the woman from the governor from South Dakota, pipes, and we're thinking about the hard stuff. What we've neglected, and what deliberately has been neglected, is the human capital, the human infrastructure, the things that take care of people. The fact that we don't have long-term health care in this country for people as they get older, especially a country that is getting older, is to me criminal. The fact that we're going back to a point where people could live out their lives destitute is just, in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, to me is just flat wrong.
We just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the ADA, and it's just and even that program, as wonderful as it is, and it was signed into law on my birthday on July 26th. It's just amazing that it's still like it was attacked under the Trump administration, and it still could use some enhancements, and it's still not being implemented in certain parts of this country, and even here in New York. It still hasn't been fully implemented. People really take it for granted. But I mean, there's so many enhancements to that. And as somebody who lives with disabilities, I mean, it breaks my heart.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much to do, and we could do so much more, but we have a political system, Peter, that is just mired in conflict, and we as a people are divided constantly. They throw these divisive issues deliberately to keep us pitted against one another. So we never get to the places where we want to go.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, and I just will reiterate, which I've probably said on your show countless times, But Senator Patty Murray, the wonderful senator from Washington, the head of the Senate Health Committee, she told me that really one story can make a difference. So I really love to emphasize storytelling. Storytelling is so important. And I talk about the fact that I live with chronic illness. I live with lupus. It's a struggle for me to get out of bed. And, it's still not easy for me. And I also live with anxiety. And, I can say that to you, and I could say that to your listeners. I could say that to millions and millions of people. But there are people that aren't comfortable saying it. And I'm encouraging them, if they're listening right now, that they think that their voice doesn't matter, but it does. Because if your voice changes that one person's mind, like if it changes Senator Senenum's mind of her, if it changes her mind to rethink this and stop playing games with this bill, then that'll save millions and millions of Americans' lives. So it's so crucial to tell your story and make your voice be heard, because your voice does matter. Every voice matters, and never let anyone tell you that it doesn't.
There you go.
And before we end our segment, I know we're coming to a close, but I did want to introduce you to the wonderful joy and love of my life, Angelica, the dog, who strangely has 5,500 followers on Twitter. And she brings me so much joy and grounds me on a daily basis. And this is your Uncle Rick, Angelica. Angelica the dog, for anyone who wants to follow her. But you need to find your own Angelica there and have somebody ground you on a daily basis, because it really makes an impactful difference in your life. Maybe Senator Sinema needs Angelica in her life.
Well, we'll send. What we should do is we'll send her the Twitter handle, and maybe she'll follow along, and maybe she'll find her way. But Peter, beautiful dog. I wish you the best. It's always great talking with you. As you have the month of action coming up in August, we'd love to have you back to share some thoughts and go through some of the actions that you're working on.
I would absolutely love that. It's at Healthcare Month. For those of you who want to follow along, I would greatly appreciate it. We're going to have just amazing on-the-ground events. Again, hopefully COVID won't curtail those. But thank you so much, Rick, for having me on your show. Always such a pleasure. And it's such an honor to speak to an incredible patriot like yourself.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it, man. Peter Morley, a good friend of the show. Make sure you check out Angelica the dog. Also, when the Health Awareness Month comes around, we're gonna most certainly talk about that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. Silk workers in Paterson, New Jersey ended their unsuccessful 6-month strike. By 1900, Paterson had won the nickname Silk City. Skilled weavers, ribbon weavers in particular, were proud of their craft. They were tenacious in fighting for the respect and decent wages they thought they deserved. Earlier that spring, these skilled ribbon weavers united all of the silk workers and went on strike. The strikers' main demand was a call for the 8-hour workday. The strikers were aided by members of the industrial workers of the world, most notably Big Bill Haywood and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The strike also drew attention from intellectuals in Greenwich Village in New York. In fact, some time after the strike started, many of the Greenwich villagers came to Paterson to observe the strike firsthand. They were impressed by the solidarity among the many nationalities of the silk workers and the courage of the strikers. The strike spread to other towns in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. Meanwhile, by May, the Greenwich villagers were working on what they called the Paterson Pageant. They hoped to bring public attention to the workers' struggles by staging a dramatic performance of the strike. On June 7th, Madison Square Garden was overflowing with 15,000 audience members and more filling the standing room only. Yet, while the Patterson pageant did bring money into the strike fund, this was not enough to help all of the workers on strike. Finally, the strikers returned to work. They were able to get a 9-hour workday at most job sites, but the elusive quest for the 8-hour day remained incomplete. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Mega investor Warren Buffett once held a big portfolio of daily and weekly newspapers, and he specialized in squeezing out competitors so each held a local monopoly. Then he'd chop staff and news content, letting him glean annual profit margins above 30%. But alas for poor Warren, along came the internet, allowing people to root around for free to find local information missing from his hollowed-out papers. They began losing readers, advertising, and profits, so in 2020, Buffett sold out his entire portfolio. But rather than concede that maybe his slash-and-burn profit maximization approach had produced inferior products, the Oracle of Omaha, as Wall Street had labeled him, blasted the whole idea of local newspapers as dinosaurs. They're toast, he proclaimed. But wait, your oracleness. When done right, local publications both chronicle and help shape a community story. And that's a social benefit that's as valuable and as marketable as ever. It's not that people have given up on local news, but that corporate-owned papers did. They're not local, not newsy, and not of, by and far, the workaday people in our communities. For example, nearly every corporate daily publishes a business section, which mostly amounts to yesterday's stock prices, corporate press releases, and syndicated filler. Does even 1% of the population read that stuff? Meanwhile, how about economic news of interest to the great majority of locals who are workaday families? Where's the regular section that digs into the wages, workplace conditions, and other real-life issues that confront this majority on a daily basis? This is Jim Hightower saying the relevant indicator of the well-being of nearly every American family is not the Dow Jones average, but the Doug Jones average. How are Doug and Donna doing? That's news that would sell papers. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden has come out with the idea of the launch to push millions of federal workers to get vaccinated. He announced today that millions of federal workers are going to have to show proof that they've been vaccinated, or they're going to have to submit to regular testing, stringent social distancing. They're going to do the masking, travel restrictions, all of that stuff. So this is that kind of, we're not going to force you to do it. And this is where my position has been all along. I'm not going to force you to do it. I'm not going to hold you down and jab you with the needle. But if you don't, then you're going to have to be pushed. You're going to have to wear the masks. You're going to have to social distance. You're going to have to be tested. And if you're positive, you got to go away. That seems to be sane and rational. This seems like the middle ground. And I know some of my friends are like, no, everyone has to be vaccinated. I'm not going there with you yet. Now, interestingly enough, the president of the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, they've come out and said, look, we're all in favor of it. This is how we're going to keep our members safe. This is how we're going to keep workers safe. This is how we're going to keep people all around us safe. So good on them. Good on the president. I think he made the right choice. It's a tough one, but I think he made the right choice. Anyway, some good news. It looks like some of the horrible stuff the last guy did finally starting to get rolled back. And we've talked about this over the last couple of years. One of the things that Trump did is signed a couple of executive orders attacking our federal employees, restraining the representation that they get through their union. Well, it looks like there's a deal on bringing some of that back. That's why I have asked Thomas Dargon to come talk with us. Thomas is the National VA Council Supervisory Attorney for the American Federation of Government Employees, afge.org, their website. Thomas, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So this is kind of a big deal because, as I remember, these 3 executive orders that Trump targeted at you guys, basically threw representation out the window, threw you out of the building, and did a whole bunch of really, really horrible stuff that really took workers' rights away and silenced their voices.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely unprecedented. That's one word for it. So May 25th, 2018, former President Trump issues 3 executive orders targeting federal employees and the labor organizations that represent them. AFGE, my employer, is the largest federal sector labor union, and I work specifically on behalf of the National VA Council representing employees at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, over 265,000 bargaining unit employees who have been on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, certainly a shift in labor relations policy, a pretty sharp right turn coming back in May of 2018.
So what were the 3 things that Trump did? I know there were 3 executive orders. Real quick, what were they?
Sure. So 3 different orders. They kind of targeted different issues. One went at merit systems principles and the protections that federal government employees have with respect to due process, also performance appraisals, things like that. There was another order targeted specifically at bargaining, so the collective bargaining process that happens in the federal sector. AFGE, again, being the largest federal sector union, and the National VA Council being the largest union representing VA employees, the Trump administration really went after the heart of collective bargaining, things like the subjects that could be negotiated, how long it would take to negotiate, which things were on the table and off the table. Traditionally, parties come to the table with a resolve to reach agreement. You come there looking to negotiate and to reach a deal that best serves, in our case, veterans and the employees on the front lines at the VA. Instead, we saw executive orders really presupposing the result of bargaining and saying it needs to be done in this amount of time. If it's not done within that time frame, you need to go to a third party to resolve the dispute. So we hadn't seen that kind of executive action happen before. And then the third executive order really went at labor organizations themselves, restricting the ability of union officials to use official time to represent and defend their colleagues in the workplace, and also going after things like our ability to use government facilities to represent those employees. So, simple things like being able to use government equipment to send emails. If a manager is going to email you because they want to investigate an employee, traditionally you were able to respond over government emails, set up that appointment, be able to represent that employee using official facilities and equipment. And that executive order, specifically 13837, went at that ability to represent an employees and really targeted those rights.
And as I also understand, it went after the ability of the union to represent the members on company time or on government time. As I was a steward for years, whenever I had to investigate a grievance or argue something or meet with management, it was always on paid time. That was one of the things that I understand that Trump tried to take away or did take away during his tenure. Is that back at this point?
So it is back. President Biden has since rescinded these executive orders on his 3rd day in office, January 22nd. But the executive orders themselves, if you just read the plain language before they were rescinded, they said right in them, this doesn't abrogate any existing collective bargaining agreement. So if you have an existing contract in effect, those executive orders were not meant to and could not lawfully trump or override an existing collective bargaining agreement. The VA has an existing collective bargaining agreement with AFGE. It's from 2011. It's been in effect this whole time. The VA never should have implemented these executive orders. We challenged that legally for the last few years, but we've been able to reach a settlement, as you mentioned earlier, and President Biden did rescind all 3 of those executive orders on January 22nd. So took a bit of time to get back to the status quo with regard to official time and the use of official facilities, but we are seeing progress across. We represent employees in every state across the country at the VA, we are seeing progress in the right direction.
Now, why is this important? Why should the average person care that federal employees get representation? Because, the sad reality is what 94% of private sector workers have no representation. They're at-will employees. They can be fired for any reason whatsoever. Why is it important that we protect our federal workers?
It's a great question. The federal government should be a model employer. It is a unionized workforce. There are issues of basic safety and dignity and fairness that employees need to bring to the attention of their supervisors, human resources officials, facility leadership, and you need union representation to do that. If there's a safety issue at your facility and veterans are being put at risk or your coworkers are being put at risk, the union can represent you to bring those issues to light and to resolve them. Similarly, if there are breakdowns in processes or procedures that are putting either patients, their families, or VA workers at risk, we need to be able to use time at work to represent people. If folks are investigated or they're disciplined, right, they have due process rights under the law. Congress found that collective bargaining and labor organizations were in the public interest. We have a right to be represented. And so having someone on site at your workforce, at your workplace who can represent you is vitally important to making sure that you're able to enjoy those basic rights.
Yeah, the only thing I ever heard during the former guys thing is how horrible the federal workers are and how they do nothing to help, especially at the VA, how they do nothing to help people. And from what I'm hearing from you is, we need to have a strong union so employees are empowered in the workplace to do their job better, to make sure that they take care of our veterans. It's a very different, and I think a much better way of putting it than the last guys. They're all horrible. You guys are all terrible and lazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one benefits from a revolving door at any workplace, right? You want people who have institutional knowledge, who have the experience dealing with the nuanced issues that veterans healthcare involves, and we want to make VA the best place it can possibly be to work. That means making sure that people are getting the correct paycheck. It means making sure that people have the correct PPE that they need to go into hospitals day in and day out during the COVID-19 pandemic and be safe and keep other people safe. It means being able to, have due process rights. Someone can't just come after you and retaliate for reporting a safety concern or another issue in a breakdown in policy or procedure. And the union's here to defend your rights, and we're very much back. We've seen great progress over the last few months with the change in administration, and we're looking forward to working with the new VA leadership in the months and years ahead to, again, make sure that VA remains the best and the largest nation healthcare system in the nation, and that it's the best place to work that it can be.
Yeah, you brought up the fact that they should be a model employer. And I've made this argument that our government, if they're spending our tax dollars, should be doing it in a way that lifts people up and lifts conditions up, as opposed to this race to the bottom, cutthroat kind of competition we see in the private sector. And it's something that I've said I would like to see more of coming out of our federal government. So I'm glad to hear this is moving in the right direction and going in that direction. As I was thinking about this earlier today, I was looking at the fact that the VA is, and I think the number that I saw was like 50,000 workers short, that you have this massive shortage of people. How much of this do you think came from the fact that one, they weren't hiring during the Trump years, and two, the environment seemed more hostile? Because I've talked to some VA employees over the years who say that just during federal government employees overall who say the workplace just got a lot more hostile during the last term. Do you think with this change in culture and this change in attitudes that you're going to be able to bring people in?
I hope so. I mean, we want to fully staff the VA. We don't want people to be working 24-hour shifts, to be creating issues of health and safety concern because they're being overworked, because they're short-staffed. That's an issue that's been going on for quite a few years. People have thrown various numbers around. We have heard, roughly 50,000 vacancies. Whether it's 50,000 or 40,000 or 60,000, the bottom line is the VA doesn't have the full staffing that it needs. There are service lines across the country that are chronically short-staffed, and that has a real impact on the workforce. You overwork and exhaust people that is really difficult to do day in and day out. So we do hope that the VA is able to attract and, more importantly, retain employees. We don't want, again, a revolving door where people are coming in and out. We want them to come to VA and stay at VA, make it the best place it can be to work. And I do hope that changes course in the next few years.
No, because as you pointed out, you need to have that institutional knowledge specifically for veterans, because they deal with some very specific issues, post-traumatic stress disorders, some type of cancers that come out of being in combat, some of those things that clearly you need to have that institutional knowledge and that specialty. So you want the best people, and you want to keep the best people. Harassing them, intimidating them, taking away their collective bargaining rights, that doesn't seem to be a way to go forward.
Absolutely. Veterans healthcare is unique. The VA is an integrated healthcare system. It's not like when you go out into the private sector and you just you go to an orthopedic appointment and you're just there for orthopedic medicine. The VA is an integrated healthcare system, right? We have mental health services, we have emergency health services, we have preventative health services. So if you go to the VA, you're able to ask questions about any kind of service that is offered there and that veterans deserve to get. So we want people who have that specialized institutional experience, who know, the resources that are available and are able to point veterans in the right direction to get it.
So what we're hoping for now is some streamlined, some negotiating. You get contracts all done, get people working in the right direction, and smooth sailing from here forward, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, actions speak louder than words. So we're very encouraged by what we've seen in the last couple of months. Things are certainly moving in the right direction, but we're really willing to work and ready to work with this new administration and new leadership at VA to repair the damage done during the previous administration. It's taken a real big toll on the workforce, and looking forward to moving forward and moving on.
Good stuff, Thomas. I appreciate you taking some time filling us in. Glad to hear that things are going in the right direction and we're undoing the damage of the last administration. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Have a good night. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Thomas Dargon, AFGE's National VA Council Supervisory Attorney. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Is this a good idea? Giving people the right to have a voice on the job, empowering them, especially in dealing with our heroes? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day more than 10,000 African Americans marched down New York's Fifth Avenue in what is known as the Silent Parade. The protest came in the aftermath of the July 2nd East St. Louis race riot and a number of lynchings in Texas. Organized by black scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, and the NAACP, the Silent Parade protested lynchings and anti-black violence. Children led the march dressed in white. Women, who were also dressed in white, followed them. Men dressed in dark suits marched behind. It was considered the first public protest of racial violence in the United States. Alexis Newman describes the scene as the parade proceeds to Madison Square. The marchers carried banners and posters stating their reasons for the march. Both participants and onlookers remarked that this protest was unlike any other seen in the city and the nation. There were no chants, no songs, just silence. Some signs read, "Mother, do lynchers go to heaven?" and "Mr. President, why not make America safe for democracy. Protesters hoped President Woodrow Wilson would make good on his election promises to promote rights for blacks. But Wilson took no action. In fact, he opposed anti-lynching legislation and continued segregationist policies in federal offices. In an editorial for the New York Age, James Weldon Johnson pointed out, quote, that their brothers and sisters, people just like them, were Jim Crowed and segregated and disenfranchised and oppressed and lynched and burned alive in this, the greatest republic in the world, the great leader in the fight for democracy and humanity.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw one of the most ridiculous bits of anger. And, I keep coming back to this. We want to be angry as a society. It just seems that way. It seems like we're not happy as a country unless we're outraged, unless we're angry at something. And the dumber the thing, the better. The dumber the thing, the more angry we get. I mean, it's like we're addicted to outrage. And this is a both sides thing, I think. Gotta have it. Gotta have our daily anger. All right, we've got to have our 2 minutes hate. Got to have our rage. Evidently, Simone Biles, the gymnast, backed out of the Olympics. And evidently, no reason. And look, I wasn't paying attention to it because honestly, I don't care. I think she's an incredible athlete. I think she can do amazing things. But if she said, I can't do it, she says, I'm not going to do it, That's her. She's the one who spent 15 hours a day for the last 6 days a week for the last, how many, 10 years she's been around? Or even more. I think she's 24. And to have someone come and be outraged that she let the country down, which is the most idiotic thing I've heard, it's just bizarre. But I guess it does. It feeds into this. We need something to be mad about. And people were literally mad at her for going, you know what? For my health, for my sanity. And look, everyone was, making up reasons why. And like, look, I don't care why she didn't do it. I really don't. She's come out now and says she had the twisties, and I don't know what the twisties are. But evidently the gymnasts of the past go, oh yeah, I got that. Okay, so she had the twisties. Does she need to tell us that? No. And I was like, I hope she's okay. I hope she comes back and she competes at another point down the road or not. Good for her. But some of the tweets and some of the comments, wow, bizarre. And the thing that gets me is if you want to be angry, there is so much to be angry and outraged about. The fact that we've got hungry kids. In the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, we got hungry children. That's something to be angry about. We got homeless kids. Something else to be angry about. We got disabled veterans. We got homeless disabled veterans. We've got all kinds of things that we're not dealing with that we should be angry about. I drive through Harrisburg, and there are people lined up begging for crumbs. We should be angry that no one's helping them, that we haven't set up a program to help bring them in. And the weird thing is the wealth class of this country loves the fact that we get riled up over things that don't really matter. That we're going to attack each other and we're going to attack other people and just be all bunched up in the panties. But the fact that we've been robbed blind for decades, the fact that our opportunities are diminished, the fact that our kids are going to be saddled with, intergenerational debt because they wanted to get an education, that doesn't seem to grab the same kind of fervor, the same kind of outrage. And, this is one of those things where I was like, just take a step back. We've got so many things to be angry about. And some of those voices were, I spent a couple minutes, scrolling through, anyone who expressed some outrage through their Twitter lines and their social media, just seeing what things they were talking about. And it's weird that they're going to be angry at this young girl who is an incredible athlete, but yet the people who attacked our Capitol on January 6th, there was nothing. The fact that you had these terrorists in our Capitol, nothing. It's just the strangest kind of thing, but it's what sells. And I was having this conversation with my wife the other night, and I was saying, the sad reality of what happens in our media spaces. And one of the things that I try not to do is I try not to do the clickbait stuff. I try not to go, hey, what's going to get people all riled up and angry? Because that's the name of this game. The name of this game is who can make people mad enough that they're going to listen, and you're going to keep their attention. Because the more angry they are, the angrier they are, the more they're gonna engage. That's the tried and true tested model. Fox News knows that rage viewers are gold, because they're gonna stick around. If you can keep feeding them the outrage, if you can keep feeding their addiction to anger, they're gonna stick around. And it's not something that I do. I'm not going to talk about things just because, well, I think they're going to gain people coming in and listening. I'm not going to take positions that I know are wrong just because, oh well, this is popular. But we've got an entire media culture now that's stuck on this idea that we need to constantly feed this outrage, constantly keep everybody all bunched up. Which is why we don't get anything done. Which is why, I was thinking about this the other day, you think about what it took to get to the moon. Think about the national mobilization. Think about, during World War II, what it took to get everybody on the same page, to move our economy in a direction that could outproduce what was an incredible German army. Think about what it took to get people all marching in the same direction to save the nation from fascism. Yet now we've got a percentage of the people who want to move us in that direction. And the Olympics, I mean, this is supposed to take us to a better place. The spirit of competition, sportsmanship. Because one of the things that I loved about Simone Biles is that when she pulled out and the Russian team, the Russian won, she was the first person to go over and congratulate them. It's called sportsmanship. No throwing a fit, no kicking and screaming. I heard one guy say, well, this is what happens when you have an environment of everyone gets a trophy, a participation award. I don't know how that fits. But he needed that to be angry. About what? I have no idea why. Are our lives that unfulfilling that we've got to be angry about things that we had nothing to do with and no control over? And that really mean, in the grand scheme of things, nothing? And yet those things that really do matter, we seem to turn a blind eye to. Interesting times. Love to hear your thoughts. Are there things that outrage you, the things that upset you, that you go, maybe we shouldn't? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
More than a month's worth of rainfall in just 24 hours. We could see that again in the coming hours.
London, the latest metropolitan center to be hit by torrential storms and floods. Volatile Middle East grapples with extreme heat, power, and water shortages. Plus,
corners of the so-called first world are getting their first taste of what fossil-fueled wealth could ultimately cost.
New study warns the cost will be very hot and very expensive.
All of those expenses and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These people are crazy. Whatever happened to cows? Remember they were going to get rid of all the cows? They stopped that. People didn't like that. Remember?
No, actually, I don't remember.
You know why they were going to get rid of all the cows? People will be next. People will be next.
And you say those people are crazy? Sir, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, first off, apologies for playing Donald Trump there. But he's back. He's saying nonsense, and I think people should know about it.
Yes, and he is not going away.
Unfortunately, what do you have for us that isn't insane today?
Well, climate scientists have widely expressed shock at the wave of extreme weather events slamming across the northern hemisphere that underscore how nations are not ready for the accelerating impacts of a climate-changed world. After destructive storms and floods in recent weeks hit Germany, Nigeria, Oman, China, and Turkey, over the weekend, a month's worth of torrential rainfall hit famously rainy London, flooding roads and subways and forcing 2 hospitals to close.
A month's worth of rain in 24 hours.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that at all, I guess.
In Mumbai, India, unusually intense storms caused widespread regional flooding and landslides that killed at least 25. Torrential storms and flooding hit 30 villages in Uganda. In China, officials say last week's rainfall exceeded all records over the past 5,000 years and caused $10 billion in damages in Zhengzhou City alone.
5,000 years.
But it's also extreme heat. Finland just saw 31 consecutive days above 77 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the longest heat wave ever recorded in that country and led to a spike in heat-related illnesses. In North Africa, heat waves have brought unprecedented temperatures topping 122 degrees. But it is absolutely the worst in the Middle East. The New York Times reports that decades of neglect and underinvestment have left the Middle East's rickety electric grid unable to meet demand, plunging homes and businesses from Lebanon to Iran into darkness and stirring unrest. Temperatures in several countries have already topped 122 degrees Fahrenheit, among the highest ever recorded, causing repetitive blackouts. Bloomberg reports that in Iran, the hottest summer in decades has triggered water shortages that in turn are sparking deadly protests as extreme heat waves bring day after day after day of record and near record temperatures.
Wow, just a little preview of what we may be looking at in this country before too long.
And speaking of, new research published Monday in the journal Nature Climate Change warns that record-shattering heat waves, even worse than the one that recently hit the U.S. Pacific Northwest, are likely to become much more common in the near future as the rate of man-made global warming accelerates.
Great.
The study projects that extended extreme heat waves lasting a week or more are likely to hit up to 7 times more frequently over the next 30 years, warning that officials must begin preparing now to adapt to unprecedented extremes rather than relying on data from heat waves of the past.
They won't.
Without major emissions cuts, after 2050, such extreme heat could occur up to 21 times more frequently. Dr. Russell Vose, chief of climate monitoring at NOAA, who was not involved in that study, told CNN,
"The last 7 years have been the warmest on record, and they really stand out from the record that preceded it. In fact, to me, when I look at them, it almost hints at a bit of an acceleration in the rate of warming we're seeing globally. I don't expect 10 years from now that we'll be cooler than we are today. If you're a betting person, it's probably a safe bet to assume we'll be warmer in the future, barring, say, some major volcanic eruption."
What does it say when we are rooting for a volcanic eruption to keep our climate cool?
U.S. officials announced on Monday that Lake Powell, the second largest reservoir in the United States, has fallen to its lowest level on record since it was first filled more than 50 years ago. In California, state regulators warned that thousands of farms will soon be cut off from surface water deliveries because intensifying drought is drying up the state's rivers, threatening the survival of the state's million-dollar salmon industry. Officials say most winter-run Chinook salmon in the Sacramento River are likely to die this year. Finally, some good news. The Biden administration on Monday moved to reverse a major Trump administration regulatory rollback. The EPA started the process of restoring regulations to reduce toxic arsenic, lead, and mercury that pollutes rivers and streams near coal plants across the country.
Some good news amongst a whole bunch of really not good news. For much more on all of these reports and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big story, a bunch of big stories, David. The big story today is the House evidently going to take up a fiscal spending bill for 2022. It's starting with a package of 7 bills to include labor, HHS, education, agriculture, energy, water, financial services, interior environment, military construction, the VA, and transportation. This is kind of a big deal, I think, that we're actually going to maybe have a budget. Maybe. Here to share some thoughts on, is it possible? Is it possible that we could get something done before we go broke on October 1st? I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So you've put in your notes that this is the first time in 14 years that we're moving on a spending bill. Is that right?
Right. You want me to go back in time to 1996 or so?
Yeah, let's go back in the Wayback Machine.
And talk about the first balanced budget in generations. You can hear that on the campaign trail, can't you?
Yeah.
With Bill Clinton, let me add that, 5 budgets. In those days, the reason I mention that, in those days, we actually used to pass 13 of them, and you combine, how you want. Labor HHS can be with agriculture, energy, however you want to do it. And we would pass one at a time. And that was the way you created a budget. What's been going on for 14 years, as I tell people, whether it was the Republicans or the Democrats running the ship, they were doing continuing resolutions. They weren't doing budgets. So in order to really properly do it, no matter what side somebody's on, Rick, you need to have these votes. And so they're going to take the entire U.S. government, and they're going to take 12 different votes, and you'll have a cap in the spending on each measure, like if you have the labor HHS bill, and then internally they can do amendments on the floor. This towards the bill, amend that towards the bill. This is the way it's supposed to be done. I think they're probably going to do this, but it's not going to turn into an actual true budget because it'll go to the Senate, and I don't think anything will make it there. So at least they're trying to get back to where you need to be on this. Now, the guy that wrote this article, the last time there was this process, he was in kindergarten. And he wrote this article today. So,
all right. Well, that's kind of.
I'll at least give him credit for trying to get back to where we need to be.
No, it's something we need. No, at the end of the day, I say the time to argue over spending is before you spend the money.
Correct.
This is the
Correct.
time to argue.
Right. So I was surprised to see that they're going to try to do it. Hopefully, this will be the first time in 14 years, and it'll set a trend. And that way, again, no matter what you're for or you're against, you do it through this process. The continuing resolutions, just, so people kind of understand this real quick. What tends to happen is the Republicans get their bit of defense spending, and the Democratic side gets its. The Republicans get the defense, and the Democratic side gets some of the social spending and domestic spending, and they kind of call it a day. So they really don't go through the nitty gritty process to really vent this all out. So again, kudos to the House for trying to restart this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not going to matter. It's not going to happen. But
hey, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
you got to be a little optimistic. Now, October 1st is it the next cliff, right? I mean, there's no chance that we're not going to raise the debt ceiling, right?
Oh no, it'll raise. Yes.
Now, even though Mitch McConnell has said no Republican's going to vote for it.
Well, I think it'll raise. It'll have to raise. Now, interestingly enough, when Mitch was running the show, and I think it was fascinating. Remember, you and I talked on your show about it, and everybody was kind of surprised. But they kind of did away with it when Trump was president. Yep. They just said, "Well, okay, we just don't have to do it right now. It's going to be automatic." So they didn't technically raise the debt ceiling under Trump. They let it raise itself.
Yeah, no, and you knew they were going to bring it. They'll bring it back when they need it to divide us again, and especially if they take the Senate. If they take the Senate back next in 2022, then yeah, it'll be back full bore.
Right.
So if the Democrats are smart, they'll raise it, pretty high, pretty significantly, so that they're not going to hit it for a while.
That's right. That's probably what it would be best to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you got to play the game, that's where you go. I did want to get your thoughts today on the fact that I woke up. There's a bipartisan deal. Rob Portman's on board. We got a 67-32 vote. The bipartisan deal's moving forward, and then Kristen Sinema comes and kind of throws a wrench into the whole thing, saying, I'm not so thrilled with the other bill, which I got to think, now is the whole thing in peril?
I don't think it's completely in peril. I mean, look, they've worked this through. They put a lot of time in it. $1.2 trillion over 8 years. It has a lot of items in there. Money for broadband. It's got your roads and bridges. 110, I think, billion it is for that, and a lot through this process. Now, I think it runs into potential House chaos. Don't get me wrong. I think the deal itself is cinched by the senators, but in the House, it's going to have some changes. And the companion reconciliation bill, which, the Speaker said we have to have that along with this. So I think that the focus group of these, bipartisan senators, which, I'll give them credit for getting this, but I think that they are forgetting about the House process, the House progressives, and others, not just the House progressives, but others who are ready to, have some battle on this.
And that's what my fear is. My fear is we end up with nothing at the end of the road because, you've got you got Senator Dipsy Doo from Arizona, who may have a new dance ready or a new curtsy ready as she votes it down. Going to throw a wrench into the whole thing. That's where my fear is, that we get nothing.
I mean, I hope not. If it's down because of that, it will be tragic. I have to think that that they'll do it. It'll happen, and they'll get it done. Then when it goes to the House, the Speaker is going to say, I think, to the progressive side and others, it's not just progressives, but and others, take your best shot. I gave you the ability to have a reconciliation bill. Now get your amendments, but if you don't get everything you want, don't come crying to me. I think that's where the Speaker will end up.
Yeah.
She's been around a long time. She's not going to have that bill go away. So yes, you're right. I hope one senator doesn't undo the thing.
Is that possible? I mean, do you think that's possible?
I think there's too many good hands in the soup now. Okay, I think.
All right.
They've got this group. I'm Let me handicap this at 80%.
Okay, so
I'm 80, 85 right now.
All right, so allaying some of my fears that we get nothing, because at the end of the day, we need some work, we need some jobs, we need some infrastructure, we need stuff, man.
This is big, and if you look at it, and if you look at what's in it, and I know it faced some problems in the House, but I think it's 80, 85%, like I said, in the Senate. And they'll work on that, or they'll promise her something, or there's a lot of magic you can do. But when you look at what's in it, I mean, there are some absolutely fantastic, items in there.
We need it.
It's needed. It's way long overdue. They stopped doing these. I mean, we used to do them, as you know, when I was there. We would try to bring them up as often as possible, and they've just sat and done nothing. So I think the opportunities here, I've got to think where there's the will, there's the way, and I think Senator Schumer's not going to let it go down as the leader.
Might get some work done. Now I got to get your thoughts on the hearings yesterday. Very predictable, I think. I think we had predicted pretty much how it laid out. We got the testimony of the 4 police officers. Very, very, traumatic, very heart-wrenching, all of that stuff. Thoughts?
The police officers were magnificent. I mean, the way they laid it out was true. It was genuine. I'll be honest with you, Rick. It was hard for me to watch. If you have served in that building, if you've been a staffer in that building, and you know how the Capitol Police daily try to make sure everybody goes home the same condition they came to the Capitol in. And everybody knows that. So when any member that watched that wants to turn around and talk about the tourists taking selfies, it's an abomination. These were real people. They were 4 officers who were dedicated. They were dedicated, and this is, I thought, was a great item. I think it was Officer Hunt, but they made it clear that they protect people whether they agree with them or not. I mean, this wasn't about politics yesterday. I thought it was a dynamic start. I think it's going to be, frankly, the probably the highlight of the entire process. In the sense of it's something that appealed to, I think, most people in this country.
I hope so. I mean,
it was emotional, it was raw, and it was from the heart.
Yeah, I mean, and look, they followed it up with video from their body cameras, and
sure.
It was. I don't know how you can look at that and go, there was anything negative toward them, but yet there are those voices out there who, they're just said some really horrible things about those 4.
Well, yeah, and that's what I said. I can't understand it. Having served in that building, anyone that served there, I don't care if it's for a day or a month or 10 years, you grasp what is going on in the Capitol when it comes to service by the Capitol Hill Police, and of course Metro DC too, in this case. But I just thought that the testimony was very compelling. It laid it out on the line. To me, it should take away anyone's doubt, that these were just tourists. The one officer called them terrorists, and I think he correctly did that.
Yeah,
so these weren't biased people.
Right, and came with the definition. Now, Elise Stefanik, the representative from New York.
But the fundraiser from New York.
That's what I was going to.
You
beat me to the punchline.
Right, okay.
Of all of the disgraceful things that came out of that, the fundraising. I mean, how do you do that? And not fundraising for the party, not fundraising for the police officers, not fundraising, for the policeman's ball or the widow of people who, Officer Sicknick, or those who took their lives, or the hundreds of people who were injured. Not that, but for her own campaign and political ambition. That was grotesque.
I thought it was. It was done, the same day. And it's to, protect all of us from them, those who want to twist the information, of the day is basically the theme. I just thought the timing was terrible, disgusting. Why would you want to do that? I mean, think of another theme another day,
Pure opportunism. And sadly, that's what we've got in that body right now. That's what's frustrating. But here again, she came out, and as we discussed, put the blame solely on Nancy Pelosi. So I did want to ask you again, because we've gone through this. Is Nancy Pelosi responsible on any level in this for what happened on January 6th?
Well, as you know, Rick, way back, you and I both predicted this would happen.
Sure.
That they would be after Nancy Pelosi. And here's the thing. The Sergeant of Arms of the House reports it. And I noticed, by the way, it didn't get a lot of attention, but they also went after the ranking member of House Administration, went after Zoe Lofgren, the chair. I used to chair House Administration. Zoe was, Congresswoman Lofgren was a member on the committee when I chaired it, and they went after her, too. They said, well, she hasn't been in the Capitol since May and, up to that time, et cetera. I knew they would do that. Now, here's the problem with it all. I think that the internal mechanisms that need to be corrected have to be corrected down through the Speaker and the minority leader, which is McCarthy, and in the Senate, of course, you've got Schumer and McConnell, and they need to, make sure that the system works. So just as much as if they're going to say that the Speaker and Zoe Lofgren are, culpable in this and that they have, a problem with how they ran the security, the problem they're going to have is the Democratic side will point out, and rightfully so, the ranking member of House Administration and the minority leader definitely weigh in on this entire security process also. So that's going to be their problem. If they want to say it's all the fault of the Speaker, well, it's going to wrap in the minority leader, McCarthy, too, because that's how it runs.
Right.
I've done it. I've been there. We make joint decisions. They have joint conversations. If anybody thinks that when the Capitol has warnings, security warnings, as it did that week, if anybody thinks that there's not a communication between the Democrats and Republicans, then they don't know how the Capitol operates. There is. So any flaws that occurred by all of them.
No, I'm right there with you, and the leadership as well of the Capitol Police right on down, because
exactly.
All of this stuff was predictable. As I said, the day of, I woke up in the morning going, I wonder how much blood will be in the streets today, because I was reading Parler. I was reading some of the social media posts of people who were talking of, if they're going to take my guns, I'm going to stack up the bodies. Just some of the worst, most, vile stuff that, if I'm reading it, I got to hope that the FBI, Homeland Security, the Capitol Police, the Metro, I got to hope they're all seeing it too.
And you have to remember the Sergeant of Arms was appointed by John Boehner, by the Republicans. So there's all kinds of shared problems, not guilt, not, to point the finger at, but shared problems. And together they can correct it, but this is going to become a partisan, back and forth. He said, she said is what's going to happen with it. But that's going to be the tack they're going to take. You and I talked about it, and we knew it would happen.
Yeah, there's no surprise there. But ultimately, I do want to know why they were so left wide open. I still want to know why they were allowed to have metal poles and metal flag poles. Because as I've said before, I've been to numerous protests where you better have cardboard tubes or you've got nothing.
Well, I think you're going to find, too, and, the chief of police of the Capitol kept, at the time, and of course he got, snared up in getting dismissed, too. But he said, he kept asking for help and warning. And I know in the past, crisis points, the Sergeant of Arms, he called Steny Hoyer. Steny was the ranking member at the time. He's one of the Democrat leaders now. Bill Livingood called Steny Hoyer and I. In fact, he stopped both of us at the same time, said, we're about to invade Iraq in 10 minutes. Can we put the Capitol on alert? He did that. When 911 happened, one of them was on the phone to Steny from his office, and his deputy was on the phone to me. That's the way it works. Right. I'm sure at some point in time in this particular January 6th, insurrection, I am sure that phone calls were or should have been made by the Sergeant of Arms to McCarthy, the minority leader, and the Speaker's office to the Speaker. Now, maybe the Sergeant of Arms didn't do that. The Capitol Police functioned as rank and file as best they could, so maybe there were flaws at that level. But those quote sins or errors are going to go around not just to the Democratic side, but people that supervise on the Republican side too.
Yeah.
So they need to correct it. But again, the tactic they're going to take is that it was solely, the Speaker's office.
No, because the base hates her in the worst way
Correct.
possible,
Right.
and they'll be blinded by their outrage. So, and look,
Right.
it's the only tactic they had, and yesterday they looked really bad. So, last question I've got going forward was yesterday in your view the highlight, the hype, the pinnacle of the messaging you're going to get out, or do you see some things coming up down the road that will grab people's attention?
Well, I think there are going to be, some things that are going to grab the attention of people. I think there's probably eventually going to be some information that comes out about money that was spent with these, white supremacist groups and money that was spent to promote this and who promoted it. I think some of that will come out. But I still think, at the end, I don't think the commission bangs the gavel and here it is. They've made the statements today about, what the officers have said happened. We all know it happened. So I think this was an important day to set the tone. I think some things are going to come out. I just don't think we're going to have the, shock and awe maybe that something so new and startling is going to come out, that the committee takes a second life. I think it'll do its work. I just think today was, more of a highlight of it.
Yeah, I want to know who was saying what to who, how, when, why. I want to see phone records. I want to see all this. We find out today Mo Brooks was wearing a bulletproof vest. I want to find out how prepared were they for this day, considering that information.
Well, and I think some information is going to come out on some individual members and things they did or said. I think we might have some new revelations on that. That might be some new information.
Going to be interesting to see how this
It
goes.
will.
But Bob, I appreciate the time. As
Thank you,
always,
Rick.
your expertise, your insight, so valuable. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. And look, one of the reasons I love Bob is he has the institutional knowledge. He's been through these things. So the argument that, and I knew this from the beginning, Pelosi was going to be the target because you ask any Republican, it's visceral. They've been building this kind of hatred of her for decades. This is not new. And I'm not sure if it's the misogyny, yes, or if it's just the Democrat, or if it's both. There's nothing worse than a Democrat woman to a Republican. So, and being from San Francisco, probably the triple threat. So right there, that blinders completely on. And the GOP knows that. They know the blinders go up. They know the kind of visceral hatred without thought. Because I thought the same thing. Wait a second, if Pelosi's the cause, isn't McCarthy part of it? And to have McCarthy come out and kind of is kind of amazing. I mean, think about the level of. Think about the stones it takes to point your finger at somebody else and say that person's responsible when you are equally culpable. That is, to be honest, as I said earlier, we had Joe Walsh, the Tea Party congressman, on earlier in the week. When he says the exact same thing that Nancy Pelosi says, because they are on opposite ends of the political spectrum, when they both agree on the fact that Kevin McCarthy is a moron, I am, all right there on board that maybe it is possible we can have unity. Maybe it is possible we can bring the nation together. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You think it's possible? You think this committee is going to bring us anything? I'm hoping. I am. I'm hoping that there's some revelations. I'm hoping that there are things that are going to wake us up, shake us awake, and inform us on what happened, who was behind it, who funded it, who pushed what where, and who was all involved. That's the only way we can heal. That's the only way we can move forward. That's the only way we can stop this from happening again. Because sadly, I agree with Liz Cheney. If we do not get to the bottom of this today, we will be inviting a January 6th kind of insurrection every 4 years. And I don't think anyone wants that. One of the bedrock foundational moments in our country when John Adams left after losing the presidential election, and the first bloodless change of power in the history of civilization, setting the tone for more than 200 years of peaceful transitions of power, of bloodless transition of power. To have Donald Trump and his supporters and his terrorists break that, I got a problem there. And I hope you do too. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Looking forward to the next couple of days. More on the infrastructure bill. I'm hoping Senator Dipsy Doo gets a little pushback, and maybe she comes around and we get the infrastructure that we need. Also, but on the other side, I'm kind of looking forward to see what kind of bizarre dance she comes up with. Anyway, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.